So my name is Todd Meyer. Today I'm going to be talking about how we've used Pendo to accelerate feature adoption through data-driven user guidance. That was Michael Peach's sort of massage wordsmithing of the original title of this session. But I'll go into what I'm going to be talking about here in a second. So again, my name is Todd Meyer. I am a senior product manager at Infusionsoft. And so after the slide, I was going to put a slide in about here's all the cool stuff that I do outside of work. And then I remembered I have a 1-year-old, and she's all the cool stuff I do outside of work. So this is my daughter, Hallie, and yeah, outside of work, like I'm being a dad most of the time. So that's kind of like what I do outside of work right now. So it's real quick, I just wanted to talk about Infusionsoft. Those of you who aren't in the small business space probably haven't heard of Infusionsoft. Even those who are in it may not have. So we're out of Chandler, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix. And sort of our tagline is we help small businesses succeed. So we're a SaaS product that really combines CRM, marketing automation, and e-commerce, along with a sort of marketplace of integrations and apps and partners and things like that to help small businesses succeed. We've been around for around, I'd say like the current iteration of the product, about 10 years or so. The company itself a little bit longer than that, like 13 years. And it's really, it's been a cool product or cool company to work for. I came on board at Infusionsoft about 5.5 years ago. I started in our customer success department, actually, interestingly. I had come from a finance background, realized finance was totally not the thing for me and started here. But anyway, it's been a cool company to work for. We've grown from about 120 employees 5 years ago to over 650 employees now. So it's been a really fun, like, I think the last speaker there was talking about the experience of kind of a startup-y through IPO and beyond. We're not at IPO yet, but that's kind of the trajectory that we're on. So it's been a really great learning experience for me. And as I got into product management, which has been about 3.5 years now, it's been, again, like really great experiences for me at Infusionsoft. So today, what I'm going to be talking about is kind of 3 main areas. First is what I'm calling tracking what matters. So with Pendo, you can track everything, but I think as you kind of get into Pendo and you learn that you can track everything, you realize, well, I don't want to track everything. I want to be tracking really what matters and what I can then take and be actionable on. So that's going to be the first topic. Second, we're going to be talking about guiding users to do your bidding. And despite the kind of nefarious nature of that title, what I really mean there is just using Pendo to really identify segments of your users who might not be doing what you think they should be doing, and then using Pendo to guide them to the areas of the application that they should be using. So I'll go into some examples of what I mean by that. And then finally, using Pendo to solicit targeted feedback from your users, and then using Pendo, since it knows who gave you that feedback, following up again later to actually give them some feedback and kind of close the loop with your users who give you feedback. So that's the 3 main areas today. I'll be kind of, again, talking about a lot of the use cases that we've done or used at Infusionsoft. Hopefully you guys can take away something from this presentation today. So again, first topic here, tracking what matters. So before we had Pendo, this is probably an accurate description of how I felt as a product manager at Infusionsoft like 3 years ago. We had some basic stats around I don't know, contacts in the application and really high level stuff, but we had absolutely no idea what our users were actually doing in the app. So before Pendo, we had a different solution that didn't work out for us, but really since we got Pendo, all of a sudden we could track all the things, and it was amazing. I mean, we got in there, and I think a lot of you, I know everyone's at a kind of a different stage of their usage of Pendo. Some people are just starting out. Some people have been with Pendo for a while, but I think the first inclination is tag everything you possibly can, tag all the pages, tag all the features, and then you kind of, so you do that right away. But all of a sudden, you realize you've tagged too many things, and it's kind of like you're on data overload. So that's kind of where we found ourselves after a few months, where we had tagged everything, but I couldn't give that list to my boss and say, hey, here's all the value our users are getting, because ultimately, all of that didn't necessarily easily translate into value. So what we realized was, I think intention is a key word in all the sessions or a lot of the sessions that we've seen, but like other things in product management, approaching Pendo with intention is important, and kind of thinking through what are the answers you want to get from Pendo, and then tagging appropriately. So really just the way we shifted was, instead of just tracking everything, focusing on tracking the things that help us best measure our users' ability to get value from a particular feature. So I'm going to talk about an example. I was recently on a team that built a new email builder for our product. That's, again, one of our features is email. And when we looked at this, there were kind of some key features that we wanted to track. So this right here is the template selection page. This was new. Prior to this, we didn't have any sort of template gallery. So one of our hypotheses was, and based on the user feedback that we'd gotten before we built this, was that our users really wanted a selection of pre-built templates to start from. So this was going to be one of the things that we wanted to track, like, are users getting value from this, or are they choosing to just create their own templates? And this is a shot of inside the actual builder itself. Again, initially we had kind of literally tagged everything up here. So we were like tagging, did they click this dropdown? Did they click this dropdown? And we kind of like went crazy. But then we realized, OK, this is, while it is interesting, and actually there are situations, like especially for a UX person, who might want to really get into the weeds and like see, OK, like, do we really need, I don't know, this particular option in this dropdown? For the most part, that's not actually telling us what's valuable to the user, which is ultimately what we're trying to deliver as value. So ultimately, we came up with 4 major sort of primary metrics to track, and these were also aligned with kind of what we were reporting up to our management and things like that, because these were a lot more consumable. So ultimately, first one was just, did they select a template or start from scratch? Hypothesis being, if they were selecting templates, that was actually valuable for them. Second was saving a custom template. So this was, once you created a template, you could save it as a custom one. So you could come back and use it again later. This was indicative of users sort of starting to adopt this new email builder versus just kind of trying it out and then not coming back again. Obviously, sending email, again, that's another primary metric to track. And finally, did they switch from the old builder? So this was something that in our platform, it's kind of like there's a lot of tools in the platform. And we have a lot of businesses that have built their business with those tools. And so they're not going to be, we knew that it was going to be sort of an uphill battle to get them the current users to switch to this new builder. And so, and some of the ways that it was built anyway, we couldn't just say flip a switch and the next day they all have this new builder and all their old templates were working. So part of it was going to be sort of a migration and like getting our old users to switch over. So for that, we actually created a segment, which again is a really great way to track things. So this is just a quick example, but for us, we had the rules for that segment were people needed to have sent at least 3 emails with our new builder, and then they were no longer sending emails with the old builder. So like recently they hadn't sent a builder. So this was somebody that we considered a user who had sort of fully switched to using our new email builder. And I guess like the thing I just want to point out here is really segments are probably, from what I've noticed, of all of our users in Pendo, probably the thing that are least understood and least utilized to their maximum potential. Segments are extremely valuable, and especially if you have, I mean, even just with Pendo data, but also if you have Salesforce data integrated as well, which we do, you get this really rich sort of set of options to create a really targeted segment. So with segments, our approach is always just really like taking a few minutes and like brainstorming, like if we're trying to identify users who have switched to using this new email builder, like what are the characteristics of that group, and then designing a segment and actually probably testing it as well to just see how many users does it return to see if that makes sense. So again, just wanted to touch or kind of like emphasize that segments are really valuable within Pendo, both from a just reporting standpoint, but also then from a guide standpoint as well. So we implemented the tracking on those key features, and what we saw was about 20% of our existing users had adopted, like we considered adopted this new email builder, but like 80% were still using the old one. So after a few weeks, that kind of like stagnated there, and we realized that, okay, we need to get some feedback from these users and kind of figure out like what do we need to do to get them to make this switch, because clearly just dangling this new email builder in front of them isn't working. So obviously we can talk to some users, but again, using Pendo, there's some really awesome ways for us to like identify who are the users who didn't come back. And so again, this is another segment very similar to the last one, but this is people who had basically tried the new email builder, but for some reason went back to using our old email builder. And so from that, we were able to get basically a list of users and use the segment to actually send a targeted guide to those users, which would basically pop up and give them a quick survey, just ask them, hey, like, we noticed you tried our old builder. We'd love to get your feedback and see what are your thoughts on what's missing and things like that. So we, again, fired a guide from this segment to get feedback from those users. And what we found was kind of three main things. One was, like I said, the number one thing was just missing features, which we did know about. We weren't trying to like replace all the old features in the old builder, but what this gave us was a really clear list of like, okay, like, I mean, it's not strike through, obviously, but some of the things that were missing from our new builder that our users were really like, I need this to be able to continue or to switch. Also, we identified a different category that we didn't expect, which was missed features. And these were things that actually were there, but they were giving us feedback that weren't there, which identified a couple UX issues that we hadn't caught in our early testing and kind of hadn't been surfaced. So that was actually really interesting as well. And then finally, they had a bunch of old save templates in our old builder that there was no way for them to use those in the new builder. And so that was actually another reason as well. Like, again, just kind of cost of switching. It would have taken them time to rebuild those templates, which was another thing we kind of knew about. But again, getting that feedback ultimately ended up, we built a conversion sort of script that would convert all of their old templates for them. So, so what you see here is a guide that we put in the application. This was targeted at that same group that we had identified of people that had tried it but stopped using it. And again, I think that's one of the things that I'd like to kind of, again, touch on with Pendo that's so great is a couple other speakers have talked about kind of the sort of a struggle, but with Pendo to like manage messaging and not over messaging your users. And what we've found is the best way to avoid over messaging is to really always do targeted messaging. And like very rarely should you be sending messages to literally all of your users. There's almost always some sort of subset of those users that this message is more applicable to. And ultimately, the more applicable the message is, the less fatigue it causes on your users because it's actually relevant for your users. So here you can just see, we just said, hey, there's some big updates. And then specifically, here's all the things we fixed or changed. And please give it another shot. So that resulted in a 29.7 increase in adoption in that target group, or overall rather, which kind of pushed us up above the 50% range. So this was, like that guide alone was extremely valuable in communicating to those past users the features that we'd implemented, and then kind of driving those users to actually adopt that feature. I think without Pendo, like relying on other forms of communication really wouldn't have been nearly as effective. Okay, so just kind of to recap, as far as tracking what matters, so approach Pendo with intention, track the things that represent user value, and I think this is definitely an important one. And then finally, use that data that you get that you're tracking to actually get answers from your users and follow up with them later. So the next section I'm going to talk about is guiding users to do your bidding. We kind of talked about that a little bit, but so again, you might be wondering, so like, why aren't more people using this new feature that we just built? So another example I'm going to be talking about here is we built a invoicing feature in Infusionsoft that was kind of similar to the email builder, where it was a complete replacement of the old feature. But due to, I don't know, probably some like mistakes on our part, honestly, we didn't spend the time to build the user experience in a way that kind of surfaced it to those old users. So it's kind of buried in a settings menu, and they just weren't going to find it on their own. And did you know that all users read your release notes? Did you guys know that? Yes. Well, we kind of thought that more users read the release notes, but turns out no one ever looked at this. We looked at this. 4.6% of our users read the actual release notes, which is an extreme small number and kind of depressing given the amount of time that we spend on our release notes. So clearly, like relying on release notes to communicate this to our users wasn't going to work. And this is just, again, like our help center going through the release notes, but it's like they're long, they're complicated, and for our power users, they love them, but for most of our users, they never even see them. So I'm going to kind of show you guys like what we did to remedy this and kind of what the effects were. So this first sort of section down here, this was the first few weeks that we had kind of rolled out this new invoicing feature. Again, but our current users had to like opt into using this. And so this is like the self-discovery phase. And in this phase, really you can see like very little adoption. There was not a lot of our current users that were using this. And seeing that usage data, we kind of started thinking like, okay, like we're pretty confident that this is actually valuable, and it's not just that they don't want to use it. So our hypothesis was that this was really more of a discovery issue, like they didn't know that it was there. So we launched an in-app Pendo guide targeted specifically at the users who were using the old invoice feature, just to kind of like say, hey, like there's a new, better invoicing experience. Called out kind of the three main benefits of like why we built that and the benefits that they were going to get, and then let them hit next. So what we saw, like we did a first test of a sort of sort of very, very targeted version of that, and we saw an immediate, like, huge increase in the amount of users who went and actually enabled that in their applications. So then we did another same guide, just like a wider net, a little bit larger, also including users who weren't even using the invoicing feature in the past, but based on other usage, sort of their usage profile, we felt would use this if they knew about these updates that we made. And you can see, again, like a huge spike, and it continued to go up after this, but a huge spike in usage. So overall, like that guide resulted in over a 1,000% improvement in adoption from the first few weeks. So just again, like this, you know, I don't want to advocate for the use of guides in place of bad UX, because that's not good. But at the same time, the time that we could implement this was much quicker than trying to go revisit the UX, and especially given that it was sort of a migration thing for old users, it wasn't a huge priority for us to like reinvest in the UX for them. So in this case, Pendo really was able to help us identify those users who should be using it and drive them towards that feature. So yeah, so again, just to recap real quick, create a targeted segment, launch a guide, and show them what they're missing. So finally, the last section I'm going to be going through here is soliciting targeted feedback and following up later for bonus points. So back to our email builder example, talking about like what do users think of our new email builder? And there's a lot of ways you can ask that question, but what we wanted to do, so so I think as a product manager, a lot of times we get accused of like not listening to our users or like not doing anything about the feedback we get. And I think more than anything, we get that rap because we don't have the time to respond to a lot of the feedback that we get. And so like we take it all in and we use that feedback, but to our users, they just feel like they're giving us feedback and they never actually hear back from us. So we actually saw an example. This is an Outlook, and you can see this little like smiley face up here. We saw this example. We actually really liked what they were doing, which was they had a little like in-app kind of feedback mechanism where you could hit the drop down, tell them what you like or what you don't like, and then submit that feedback to Microsoft. So what we decided to do was implement a very similar feedback loop in our new email builder using Pendo. So has anyone used badges here with Pendo? Yeah, okay, cool. So a lot of you have. So badges are really great because they allow you to like place something in your application, like a little warning symbol, or they have a drop down of like a bunch of different options to like trigger a guide or trigger a little tooltip. But they also have a custom image option, which is great. So we used the custom image option, uploaded our own image, and then put that in our email builder. So you can see kind of up here on the top left here that we added this leave feedback button. And so yeah, here it is. So when people click it, they get an in-app survey that pops up. This is inside of Pendo. It's a guide where they can just ask. We ask them what area of the builder are they giving feedback related to? How well does this area meet your needs? And give them feedback. This is actually not using Pendo's guide functionality, only because we were doing some things that were really like beyond the capabilities of the native sort of I guess like survey capability within Pendo. So this is actually in Survey Gizmo. Survey Gizmo has an iframe option, so we just iframe this inside of the Pendo window. But one of the really cool things is, even though it's in Survey Gizmo, you'll notice there's no like first name, last name, email, because again, from a user experience standpoint, that's kind of like not ideal to have to ask your user who is logged in to re-enter their information, which is silly, right? So the cool thing though is that with Pendo, so the same way you can inject merge in someone's name as like a merge field in your Pendo guides, you can use that same functionality to pass that same user data through into so for example in Survey Gizmo they have like a URL variable parameter. So when you're loading the iframe, it's like question mark user ID equals merge in the Pendo ID. So we were able to pass all of the Pendo basically identifying information into Survey Gizmo as they loaded the survey, which allowed us to like seamlessly collect that information without having to ask our users again. So then this is just an example of what that looks like for those of you who haven't seen that before. But Pendo has a help guide that kind of talks about all the different merge fields that they have available. But this is what we were passing through for later. And beyond just being able to follow up with these users, one of the things that we really wanted to do again was follow up with these customers later. So as they gave us feedback on the builder, not only just take that feedback, but then try to actually later on follow up with those users as we implemented features that they'd given us feedback on, so that the users kind of felt like, hey, I'm being heard. So yeah, so bonus points, happy users, very good. For those of you who haven't created a segment using a CSV file, there's a help on the Pendo Help Center. There's an article about how to do that. But that's what we did. So when we would implement a new feature, we would go back into our survey data and search for users who had given us feedback on that area. So like if we improved something with the image block, for example, we would go back, we'd find everyone who gave feedback on that, and then we'd create a targeted segment with those Pendo visitor IDs to be able to follow up with them later. So we would launch guides just thanking users for their feedback and then telling them about the change now that's available as a result. So this actually, we were doing this more as a I think we wanted to feel good about following up with the users and not really expecting a return on that. But we actually saw some really interesting results with this. We had customers taking screenshots of these Pendo guides and posting them on Facebook and to our partner groups, like saying, hey, they heard me. It was just amazing to see the response from customers. And we actually then looked at the NPS for that group that we had kind of done this with. And I can't remember the exact number, but it was a significant, a noticeable increase in their NPS from just giving them this sort of closed loop on their feedback that they had been getting. So if you guys are, again, just looking for ideas of what can I do with Pendo, this is a great way to not only get feedback from your users and make improvements, but also then close and loop with them later. So, and also just for I guess reference, but so we use Survey Gizmo here, but you can totally do this without Survey Gizmo. You can still do it with in-app survey capabilities in Pendo and actually it's probably easier because Pendo keeps track of who viewed the survey, who responded to the survey. And they have some functionality around as far as segments go. If you're collecting just a single field feedback like this, you could ask, or you can create segments based on text or feedback areas that contains certain text. So again, you can very quickly create a segment of users who gave you feedback about a certain feature that you're updating. So. Yeah, so again, this is just a recap. We created a guide and launched a Pendo badge, or via Pendo badge. We used the survey to collect feedback from our customers, and then after analyzing that feedback, making improvements, we then kind of followed up with that same group. So that's all I have, but I'd love to answer any questions. If you guys have questions for me about just how we've used Pendo or anything that we went over today. Yeah. Yeah, you mean specifically for features or just for the overall product?
Goals that you have from an analytics standpoint.
Yeah, so the question was just, are there any sort of analytics or KPIs that we track over time? So at Infusionsoft, we have, every product manager has kind of their own area of the app or their own features that they're working on. And so for each of us has our own sort of set of KPIs that we are tracking and kind of on a, I think, bi-weekly basis, really rolling that, putting that together and rolling that up to our management and things like that who like to see kind of how things are doing. So, and yeah, Pendo is part of that. It's not the only thing that we use to keep track of our data, mainly because it lacks the ability to really know the back end, what's going on there. So it's kind of the combination of data from Pendo of what are our users doing, and then combined with the back end data around more overall volume of emails sent and volume of invoices and things like that. So, yeah.
I was wondering how you actually communicate the data out to the larger teams. Is it a report? Is it a dashboard in Salesforce? Is it how do you do that communication to show the change?
Yeah. So. Yeah, great question. We've experimented with a few things. I'm honest to be candid, we're not doing it great right now, I don't think. We've reverted to email, which is I think the worst way of doing this, but unfortunately that was the method that we found got the most eyes on it, essentially. So we had tried originally, we created a Pendo dashboard for each of our executives of hey, just log in and you guys can see all the cool stats that we set up for you, but they were never logging in and they were never looking at those cool stats. So yeah. In Pendo, actually. Yeah, so we created, they each had their own user accounts, or they still have their own user accounts. Their dashboard, yeah, to kind of see some of the metrics that were the kind of the high-level metrics. So, but yeah, now we just take screenshots of that and put it in an email, and they read that. So yeah, I don't know. Again, not ideal, but that's what we do right now. Yeah.
You know the graph where you're showing the continuum of here's where we launched the guide, and we got this list,
yeah.
and we did another list. Do you have those as an ongoing basis, somewhere tracked, in QuickSight, or do you keep a historical continuum of the data?
Not on everything. So that was, so I think so that example was with our invoicing feature. Usually what we do is, so we roll out, we do monthly releases. We kind of have an older platform, so we're not releasing continuously right now. But we track everything in a monthly release for like 3 months for most things, 3 months after it's released, to kind of see if it's getting the adoption that we're looking for. And if it's not, like in the case of the invoices, we will use Pendo and as an intervention to kind of like get in there and find out what's going on. So yeah. Yep.
Also in line with that example, thinking about how you pulled out the product marketing numbers for your invoicing feature.
Mm-hmm.
Have you found best practices in terms of the content of the copy that you use to engage users with those?
Yeah, so question was just around best practices for copying and the content. We have a product marketing person who was awesome, and she's no longer with us, unfortunately. She used to write all the copy. So currently, the PMs are kind of in charge of writing the copy, which is not the greatest thing. But what we found is keeping it, I think maybe it was your presentation, keeping it short and punchy. Maybe you had mentioned, yeah. We try to do the same thing, just trying to keep it as simple as possible, not because as we all know, users don't read things. So like keeping it as simple as you can and highlighting if it's like so the re-engagement thing, like what are the benefits that they care about first, that's what we tend to focus on. So, yep.
How did you segment the users that you were showing the release note guides to the new features?
Yeah, so the question was how do we segment the release note guide features or guides that we do? So it kind of depends, but if a certain release has a lot of features for like one area of our application, rather than kind of like surfacing that to everybody that doesn't use that, we try to create a segment that again is kind of focused on users who use the parts of the application that we're improving. Because as much as it's kind of easy to just say, yeah, we'll just push this out to everybody, you find that just a lot of the users that aren't using that, they just don't care, and so it kind of like it eats away at a bigger chunk of their like willingness to want to view those again. So yeah. Any other? Yeah.
How did you try to make sure that you were, so you said that you were overdoing it at first.
Yeah.
How did you scale it back? What did you do to like make it tastable?
Yeah, so at Infusionsoft, we have product managers and customer experience people, as well as customer marketing, all using the guides. So there's a lot of people that are creating guides for our users. And originally, we went overboard a little bit on our messaging, and we had people calling into support saying, hey, how do I opt out of these like guides that keep popping up? So we learned a lot of lessons up front around over messaging, and that's how we kind of got really. It's kind of like no one owns the messaging, like there's no gatekeeper officially, but we created a Trello board actually, where we just, everyone who's creating a guide, will put it on there. We created a like buddy system, so everybody who creates guides has like a buddy that will check their Pendo guide before it goes out to make sure, again, like spelling and just other things, and just make sure that it's gonna be good. But then also keep track of who the guide is going to, and then what are the dates that the guide will be active to ensure that we don't have like 5 active guides at the same time for the same group of people. Yeah, yeah, sure.
How much time would you say that you put into just managing guides?
So currently not a whole lot. I think at first, and as we were setting up what I talked about, a lot more. But ideally, I mean, my primary job is being a product manager, and so managing Pendo is not what I really want to spend my time doing. So, so yeah, as little as possible. Hopefully, but great. Any other questions? Yes.
When you mentioned that you were like went tag crazy and tagged so many features and things
Yeah.
like that, and you scaled it back, did you actually like untag them specifically, or did you use like grouping and stuff just to see the ones that you cared about, still leaving the other ones tagged, because like you said,
Yeah.
UX people would want to see that data?
Yeah. So we untagged some of the things that were just like. We're never going to care about this, and even if we do, we can just retag it, and all the data is still waiting for us. So that's one of the things about Pendo that's great is, yeah, it's all retroactive. So I mean, we have, even the things we haven't tagged or we delete, like the data is still there. It's just not like defined currently, and that's one of the things that you don't have to be afraid about, tagging data. But, oh yeah, but then as far as we were using Pendo, we've been using Pendo a little over a year now, and the groups or like current like tags weren't available then. So we have like a bunch of features that are like, I don't know, area of the application, caret, like, sub area, caret, like, so we have to go back in and kind of rename a lot of those now that we have the tags, but we're using those now, so yeah. Great. Yes?
You mentioned opting out of guides. I'm curious if you or anybody else has built an opt-out mechanism so you can opt out.
So we've talked about doing this. The question was like building an opt-out mechanism for guides. And we've kind of discussed, because there's really like two main types of guides that we have, which are like sort of more of the like help type guides and the more marketing type guides. And so for the marketing ones especially, we've had a lot of users that are just like, hey, like we have a conference every year and our customer marketing team is always like putting in Pendos to like advertise for the conference and all that kind of stuff. And we've had customers that are just like, hey, like I know about your conference, I don't want to see this in the application, how can I opt out? So we haven't implemented anything yet. I'm hoping that Pendo develops a feature that allows people to opt out. Maybe they're in the room listening. But we've talked about, there's I think ways to do that. You can use custom data fields in Pendo so we've talked about like creating a opt-me out option that would set a field in Pendo that as like opted out from marketing, and then whenever we create marketing guides, just exclude the segment that has that tag. So that would work, honestly. I think we just haven't done it yet, but that's how we've discussed doing that. So. Great. Any final questions? If not? Okay, well, thanks, everybody.